Good morning, sixth grade. So yesterday we talked about Justinian and how he was able to create this Byzantine Empire and how he reunited it, and how he conquered Rome, and then he had to get slapped in the face a few times by his wife because she needed to wake him up to bring him back to reality to protect his people. Yeah, we talked a little bit about that. So today we're going to talk about something a little different. We're going to talk about the society that was in the Byzantine Empire. So while Justinian was still alive, how they ran certain things in the society. So we're going to get into that today. But first, let's go ahead and review the questions from yesterday. So number one, why did Justinian reorganize the Roman laws? So Justinian, he reorganized the Roman laws because he thought they were really complex and really difficult to remember and too many. He wanted to simplify them, and he also wanted to make sure that he guaranteed fair treatment for everybody. He wanted to make sure everyone was going to be treated fairly. Number two, why did the empire decline after the rule of Emperor Justinian? So just like all times, anytime a leader leaves, there's always opportunity for barbarians or invaders to come in, and that's exactly what happened. So they started to get invaded by the barbarians, Persians, and the Muslims, and they started to not be able to have the strong leaders to look up to anymore, and the empire started to fall apart. Number three, where was Constantinople located? So Constantinople was located on this peninsula, and it was near Europe and Asia where they meet, and this was a perfect location because it was prime location for protection and for trade. So like I said, today we're going to talk about the new society in the Byzantine Empire, so let's go ahead and get into that now. So what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to describe the different people in the Eastern Empire, and you're going to be able to talk about the new society that they created and how it was completely different from the society in the West. So in many ways, Justinian was pretty much the last Roman emperor in the Eastern Empire. After he died, a lot of the Eastern Empire, the Byzantine Empire, they started to get influenced by a lot of other people because they're getting invaded by so many barbarians and taken over. They started to get influenced by these people. Okay, so the people, they began to speak Greek, and that became the official language of the Eastern Empire rather than Latin. Latin was used mostly in the western part, but now they're going to start to speak Greek. The scholars, they also started to study Greek and not Roman philosophy. And pretty much eventually, the empire started to lose ties with the old Roman Empire, and it began to shape this whole new society, and this whole new society developed in the Byzantine Empire. The people who lived in the society never stopped thinking of themselves as Roman, though. But some of them, they started to call their new society a different name. They called the society that developed in the Eastern Roman Empire after they fell in the West the Byzantine Empire, and this was named after the town of Byzantium, or the city of where they were, like by Constantinople. So it was very different from the societies in the West. One reason that the Eastern and Western society was different was the way the Byzantines interacted with other groups. So the interactions pretty much resulted in a lot of trade. It was all trade. People were just trading. Like we said, Constantinople was the trading center, and it was a perfect idea or a perfect area for Europe to trade with Asia. And this became one of the greatest trading cities in Europe. In the back, that's the Hagia Sophia. That is a huge mosque. It was once a Catholic church, as you can tell by those huge domes. But eventually, it changed into a Muslim mosque, and that's what we're going to talk about later on. That's the building that I was telling you about yesterday in the live session. So merchants from all over Europe, Asia, and Africa, they all traveled to Constantinople to trade. And over time, the Byzantine society started to reflect those outside cultures, as well as the Romans and the Greeks. So everybody that was going there was bringing their cultures. Like we always say, when you're trading, you're not only just trading items, you're also trading your cultures. And that's exactly what was going on in Constantinople. And it affected the culture in the new society. Their government. The forms of government that developed in the Eastern and Western empires also was a huge difference. And if you notice, we're talking about a lot of these differences, and when people are different, it may start a lot of conflict. Okay, you can just look at how the Byzantine emperors dressed. They just look different. So the Byzantine emperors, they had more power than the Western emperors did. And what they like to do is they like to show off their power. They like to show how wealthy they were. They want to show how royal they were, as you can tell by the way they're dressing. So, for example, if you were a citizen in the Byzantine Empire, you could not stand up when you're in the presence of a Byzantine emperor. You had to bow down and show them that they are more powerful. They couldn't even walk. When they wanted to talk to them, they actually had to crawl on their feet or crawl on their hands and knees just to talk to the emperor, which is ridiculous. The power of the Eastern Emperor was so great that the reason why they were considered the head of the church and as well as the political ruler. In the Western Empire, we knew that the Pope was the head of the church. But in the East, they took control of everything. The emperors thought they were chosen by God and that they should rule the church and rule the empire at the same time. In the Western Empire, they limited the political power and pretty much what was happening of the emperor, and the emperor only was in charge of the politics, and then the Pope and the bishops were in charge of the church. In the East, emperor ruled all, and the emperor was the only one that to rule. Alright, so today we talked about the new society that developed in Byzantine Empire. We talked about how they started to change and they started to be a lot different than the Western Empire. We talked about how the language switched to Greek. They were influenced by a lot of other cultures, all the other people that were invading them. We started to realize that they were influenced by the trade because it became such a great trading city. We also learned that their emperor was the most powerful of them all, and he had his power and he wanted to show his wealth and show how powerful he was by having people not even be able to stand when they're around him. If the emperor was around, you had to crawl and you couldn't even look at him when you talked to him, which is kind of ridiculous. So we saw that these societies were completely different from the eastern and the western parts of the empire. For homework, I want you to answer these 3 questions. Number 1, what were 3 ways in which the Eastern and Western Roman societies were different? Number 2, why were Eastern emperors more powerful than those in the West? And number 3, how did contact with other cultures change the way the Byzantine Empire was? So that concludes our lesson for today. We learned about the differences between the Byzantine Empire and how the society was created in that area. If you have any questions whatsoever, please send me a message on Google Classroom. I'm here to help you. If not, I hope you guys have a great Tuesday, and I'll see you guys all tomorrow for our Zoom session. Bye, 6th grade.